Shalom. This week's Sedra Bo. An often overlooked factor in the plagues brought upon Egypt were the political dynamics of the whole episode. The story of the Jewish Exodus is usually told as a full frontal encounter between Paroah and Moshe, with the Jewish people and the Egyptians as background figures. The palace advisors, the Egyptian people, the Jewish people, they all must have played a role in Paroah and Moshe's thinking. It's impossible that none of them offered advice, suggestions, or even criticism to their leaders. How do these comments play in their minds? At the start of the Torah portion, God speaks to Moshe about the plagues. I'm going to read, so I apologize, but he said, "Go to Paro, for I have hardened his heart and the hearts of his advisors, in order that I might display my signs among them, and you may recount in the hearing of your sons and grandsons how I made a mockery of the Egyptians, and how I displayed my signs among them, in order that you may know that I am God." God then records what Moshe and Aaron did. Moshe and Aaron went to Paro and said to him, God said, "How long will you refuse to humble yourself before me? Let my people go that they may worship me. For if you refuse to let my people go, tomorrow I will bring locusts upon your territory. They shall fill," and pay attention to this, "your palaces and the houses of your servants and of all the Egyptians." I find it curious how God threatens Paro by explicitly mentioning Paro's own house, then his servants' houses, and all the Egyptians' houses. Wouldn't it have been easier to simply write that the locusts would infiltrate every single house in Egypt? Why did God find it necessary to mention Paro's palace, the servants' houses, and the Egyptians' houses, each of them individually? Although at face value, the Kohen Gadol's service in Yom Kippur would seem to have no connection whatsoever to the plagues in Paro's palace, I'd like to highlight an aspect of the Kohen Gadol's service and demonstrate its relevance to Paro's palace and the plagues. As part of this service, the Aaron, the Kohen Gadol, would offer 3 offerings. The first is described as follows. Aaron is to offer his own bull offering for himself and for his household. The second, Aaron shall then offer his bull of sin offering for himself and his household. And the third, Aaron shall lay both his hands upon the head of the live goat and confess over it all the iniquities and transgressions of the Jewish people. The first offering was for Aaron and for his family. The second one was on behalf of the other Kohanim. And the third was for the entire Jewish people. In both the threat of the locust infiltrating Paro's palace, the servant's home, and the Egyptian people's home, and the Kohen Gadol's offerings on behalf of his house, the Kohanim, and the Jewish people, we see concentric circles of concern. The first circle is to oneself and family. The first one's to oneself and family. The second are the ones most familiar to you, and the third are to those who follow you. Paro was most concerned with those in his own household. He was next most concerned with those who worked for him, his servants, and lastly with his followers, the Egyptians' people. God's threat, conveyed through Moshe and Aaron, was meant to highlight to Paro that God was all-knowing. He understood Paro's concerns, and in which order. God threatened Paro by explicitly mentioning each group so that Paro would understand just how devastating these threats were going to be to him and to those he was most concerned with. Each of us has concentric circles of concern in our own life. They might include family, friends, business associates. When expending effort and energy, we should recognize our circles and ask if we're putting the correct amount of energy into the right amount of people. It's very important for each of us not to waste our time and our energy on people who are outside of our circles of concern. Shabbat Shalom.